Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Choda and I have a question for you. In which world can you stop paying your rent for several months? In which world can you not be responsible for the payment of the rent? In other words, you don't have to pay it at all. It doesn't count as debt. In which world can this happen without any penalties, without you having to pay it back, and without any impact to your credit score? Well, according to Representative Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, in this world, I have in my hands a 21-page proposal, and this proposal is called the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act of 2020. By the way, I've seen some resources out there say that this could prevent you from paying your rents for a whole year. It's not for a whole year. It's actually during the COVID-19 emergency. So the proposal reads, to suspend obligations of residential renters and mortgagors to make payments during the COVID-19 emergency. So this applies to you if you're making mortgage payments for your primary residence as well, and you won't be subject to foreclosure. Now, I want to be clear about this COVID-19 suspension period that's mentioned here, and this says the suspension period means the period beginning on April 1st, 2020 and ending upon the expiration of the 30-day period that begins upon the date of termination by FEMA of the emergency declared by the president. And by the way, this emergency was declared on the 13th of March. So what that means is if FEMA decides in August that the emergency is over, then a month after that is when this suspension period will end. So it's not for a whole year, as some individuals have been saying, but it is for a definite period of time until this emergency has been declared, a non-emergency by FEMA. Now, before I get into my opinion about this and what I think about it, whether it makes sense or not, I'm going to tell you that this applies to all Americans all over the country. So fundamentally, you could be living in a small town, your rent could be $600 a month, or you could be living in a penthouse apartment in Los Angeles overlooking the ocean where your rent is $25,000 a month. This applies to everyone, which, by the way, is fundamentally one of the things that I don't like about it. So I'll get into that during the second half of this training. So what happens to landlords in this situation? According to this proposal, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development will establish and maintain a landlord relief fund, which basically will compensate landlords for the lost rent payments. But in return for that, landlords are going to have to agree to a rent freeze for 5 years. So there's some stipulations here, fair rental requirements. There needs to be a rent freeze. There need to be only just cause evictions. So a tenant may only be evicted for just cause and only pursuant to advance written notice. There needs to be no income discrimination. The landlord must make the unit available for government assistance programs, and the landlord should only get the rent that they got before this pandemic broke out. And if that isn't enough, there's a proposal in this bill for a lender relief fund. In other words, the lenders, the banks that give the money to the landlords, to the borrowers. So according to page 11 of this proposal, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall establish and manage a lender relief fund. So it's the lenders that will get some benefit as well. So now think about this. It is the renter that's supposed to get relief. Then it is the landlord that's supposed to get relief, and then it's the lender that's supposed to get relief under this proposal. So our system of government is such that we have a federal government and we have state governments. So basically, the way our system works is that the federal government is responsible for printing money, for maintaining essentially the structure of the whole economy, for maintaining intrastate commerce between states, and for facilitating things and foreign relations. Now, what are states expected to do? States are expected to maintain interstate commerce. Now, if you think about this proposal is expecting the federal government to get involved, the states to get involved, everybody, all the banks to get involved, the landlords to get involved, the renters to get involved. It is so complex. It's going to be impossible to execute. Okay, so the way this proposal works is that we have the federal government, we have the state governments, and they're supposedly supposed to work in perfect coordination to be able to pull off something like this, because again, it's a state government that's responsible for health, for welfare, for the police, What's happened so far in terms of the stimulus plan is that the federal government has actually directly given money to or tried to give money, because a lot of us are starting to receive our checks, but the federal government has essentially, in a sense, bypassed the states to give money directly to residents, which in many ways is actually a good thing, because what's happening is the money, and I know the execution can be improved because a lot of the money still has to reach people, but because the money is directly reaching small businesses, citizens, that in a sense is the federal government directly trying to help the citizens. But what's happening is more and more states are asking for funding.
You would be cutting schools 20%, local governments 20%, and hospitals 20%.
More and more states are saying, hey, we haven't gotten any funds from the federal government, we need funding. What does this have to do with the viability of this proposal? There are three reasons why I think this proposal makes no sense at all. Here's the thing. What happens is the federal government, you have the states, and then you have people. Now, if people need police officers, firefighters, healthcare workers, hospitals, again, that funding needs to come from the state. A plan like this expects the federal government to get involved, because the federal government now has to make sure that all the relief is provided to the big banks who are going to be, providing the money for these mortgages. Then this plan expects the state government to get involved, because the state government has to make sure that those citizens are taken care of, because the fact that those citizens don't have to pay rent, that essentially is something that has to be managed and overseen by the state government. And guess what? All the state governments are completely overloaded right now. So to expect at a time like this perfect coordination between the federal government, the state governments, and the citizens to make sure that rents are not paid, to make sure that mortgages are not paid, to make sure that the landlords get reimbursed, to make sure that the lenders get reimbursed, it is not going to happen. It's not realistic. I just think that this proposal isn't practical at all. So that's one of the three reasons why I think this proposal is not practical. The second reason is the fundamental imbalance or the unfair nature of this proposal. Now, I've talked earlier about the $2,000 a month proposal. That's a completely different thing. You can look at my videos about that. But as far as this proposal is concerned, based on the proposal as it stands today, someone living in an expensive rental apartment overlooking the ocean, a penthouse apartment in Los Angeles or in San Diego, that person would also get rental relief compared to someone living in a small apartment in a small town. And that's not right. And that it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be the same for everybody. And the third point is, in my opinion, our fundamental architecture of society, our fundamental sense of civic responsibility. We need to fulfill our responsibilities. One of them is paying rent. Okay, and talking about civic responsibility, I want you to consider this. Do you expect a police officer to show up? Do you expect a firefighter to show up? Do you expect to find someone at the hospital when you go? Do you expect emergency services? Do you expect 911 to respond to your calls? You do, right? So if everyone else is expected to fulfill their civic responsibility, I think so should all of us. This is a question of fundamental civic responsibility. We expect local services, if we expect the state government to perform its function. So I think that when we pay our rent, we are actually being good citizens and fulfilling our civic responsibility. So I feel that instead of just, saying, hey, you don't have to pay rent anymore, there needs to be a much more structured manner of helping people, whether it's a $2,000 a month stimulus plan. And again, I made videos about that. I talked about the truth behind it. I talked about the future of the plan. I've talked about the pros and cons of that plan. So you want to go ahead and check out those videos. But this proposal, fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned, is a no-go, simply because the way it's structured, I believe it's structured without taking into consideration, it's about how challenging this is going to be to execute. It's simply not possible for the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development to oversee all the lenders, to oversee all the borrowers all across the country. It's just not possible. It's not feasible. And if something like this were to be executed or were to be implemented, it would be absolute chaos across the system, and things would just get way more complicated than they are already. So in a nutshell, I'm not a fan of this proposal. I just want to be clear. Do I think all of us need help at this time? Absolutely. All of us need help. But essentially, we need to find better solutions. And I think that because the pain is continuing, and if the pain continues for a long time, we will see many, many different proposals. A lot of them, like this, may not make sense at all, but some of them probably will. And hopefully, we can find something that helps all of us and something that is fundamentally fair. Thank you so much for watching. Please click like, please click subscribe, please click the notification button so you can get a notification when I'm releasing my videos. I look forward to creating this content for you. And comment below, because I read every single comment and I respond to as many as I can. I appreciate you watching this training, and I'm looking forward to helping you by breaking down some of these complex proposals as they come out and giving you the information so you can make an informed decision about how you feel about it. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.